Hey, Yetis, this is Nick and Jack from the Best One Yet podcast. Now, the last company we worked at, they used Paylocity and everything just worked. It wasn't until launching our own media business, this show, that we realized how rare that is.
Because Paylocity is one delicious burrito of operational needs. They roll up HR, finance, and IT seamlessly into one delicious bite.
When everything wraps together like that all at once, your workforce, your tech stack, your business, you don't need more tools. You don't even need cilantro.
You need one solution.
And that is why Paylocity built a single platform to connect HR, finance, and IT with AI-driven insights and automated workflows that simplify the complex and power what's next.
Or as we call it, a delicious operational burrito.
Yes, we do. Experience a one place for all your HCM needs, besties.
So start now at Paylocity.com/one.
Paylocity.com/ONE.
Howdy, howdy, ho, and welcome to Fantasy Fan Fellas. I'm Hayden, producer of the Fantasy Fangirls podcast and your resident lover of all things Sanderson.
And I'm Steven, your bookish internet goofball, but you can call me the Smash Daddy.
And we are currently deep diving Brandon Sanderson's fantasy epic, Mistborn. But here's the catch. Steven here has not read Mistborn before.
That's right, hey. So each week, you'll get my unfiltered, raw reactions to every single chapter.
And along the way, we'll do character deep dives, magic explainers, and Steven will even try to guess what's next. Spoiler alert, he'll be wrong.
Newsflash, I'm never wrong. Episodes come out every Wednesday, and you can find Fantasy Fan Fellas wherever you get your podcasts.
Are your ad campaigns lighting up the dashboard, but not the pipeline? That's Bullspend. And marketers are calling it out in Dashboard Confessions.
My boss asked for results, so I opened my dashboard for the only positive-sounding metric I had, impressions.
Cut the bull spend. See revenue, not just reach. LinkedIn delivers the highest return on ad spend of major ad networks. Advertise on LinkedIn. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a $250 credit. Go to linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
Podcasters of the world, hello and welcome to another rousing episode of everyone's favorite retail media podcast. Actually, you know what? Scratch that statement. This is everyone's favorite podcast ever, period. That's right. You found yourself in the garage. I'm your host, Dan Massimino. Consider me the ringmaster of this little circus. I'm going to take a quick second and thank each and every one of our listeners out there. Your support means the absolute world to us, and we couldn't do this without you. Honestly, if we tried doing this without our listeners, it would just be a couple of dudes talking with headphones on to each other on a computer. Sounding familiar? That's just a Zoom call. So thank you so much for tuning in and giving us your precious time. We really, really appreciate it. We're here to try to make the retail media industry a better place for us all, so let's dive in. And if you're happening to join us for the first time, welcome on in, grab a stool and pony up to the workbench, and let me fill you in a bit. The garage is a place where we get together and talk about many things, but where we really hit the sweet spot is when we get some friends and dive into the why, the how, and the who cares of retail media innovation. But now the moment I've been waiting for. It is with great pride and pleasure that I get to introduce you to my dear friend and colleague. He is 6'5" of pure Canadian maple. If axe throwing makes it to the Olympics, either summer or winter, his imposing figure will be standing tall atop the podium with both gold and silver medals, because no one takes second place to my guy, the Vice President of Product Innovation at Albertsons Media Collective, Evan Haborka. How are you, sir?
Oh my goodness, Dan. The intros have gotten progressively better. And I love that it's an audio format so nobody can validate your very complimentary claims of my stature. The Canadian part is correct, so we can start there. Yeah, very excited for today's episode.
We try to paint a picture with words, Evan, so people can join us if they can't see us right now.
I love it, right? And we're in marketing, so we got to speak big, bombastic statements.
Just trying to sell more stuff faster. That's what we do.
I love the reminder, like this is an educational podcast. It is brought to you all through the lens of Albertsons, but our focus here is to really educate the industry, including ourselves. I can't say there's been an episode where I haven't left knowing 2 or 3 things more than when I joined. And in this case, in this episode, we're really going to lean into that educational conversation on a channel that I would say is the most talked about, the highest potential for growth within retail media and media in general, but also the most confusing and complex. And that is the channel of CTV. And you really can't talk CTV without including linear TV and the role that that's playing in CTV's growth. So today's going to be quite a deep dive with what I think is one of the industry's experts and has been for a decade plus. I'll throw it to you, Dan, for the intro.
Absolutely. So you guys can tell that I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but Evan alluded to that our guest, next level smart. Sean Muller is the founder and CEO of iSpot TV, the leading TV ad measurement solution trusted by hundreds of leading brands, agencies, and networks. Founded in 2012, iSpot was the first company to bring real-time transparency to linear TV advertising, and later became the first to commercialize smart TVs for measurement purposes at scale. iSpot is known for transforming the marketplace by delivering rapid creative assessment, business outcome, and cross-stream TV measurement that networks and brands can use to plan, buy, and optimize TV advertising. Sean has founded or served as a key executive in half a dozen ventures throughout his career, including Demand Media, MediaNet Digital, eNom, and The Wedding Tracker, which I cannot wait to hear about. He's a graduate of the University of Washington and resides in Bellevue, Washington with his wife and 2 boys. A proud Husky, I'm sure. Sean Muller, ladies and gentlemen, how are you?
I am doing well, Dan. Thank you for having me.
Super glad you're here. I think there's one pressing question on everybody's mind right off the bat, the most important question. Are we going to see a repeat performance by the Huskies this year, or is losing so many talented players an insurmountable issue for their football team?
That's a great question.
Puts you right on the spot, Sean.
Oh, I love it. I was at the national championship game last year where my Huskies unfortunately lost to Michigan, but had an epic season. And now they're part of the Big Ten, and I expect them to be back in full force, even though we've got a new coach and a whole bunch new quarterback and a whole slew of new players. But it was a magical season last year.
Well, I love talking sports. We can talk sports off the air, but I think it was a bit of a disservice to the old Huskies when they left them off the preseason top 25. That gives them some bulletin board material in the locker room, I think.
That's okay. The Huskies are used to not getting as much love in the polls as they deserve.
Well, one fellow, no love in the polls from Boise State to the Huskies. I get it. So good luck to the Huskies this year. Good luck to the Broncos. Let's dive in real quick. How did you end up in this discipline? Is this something you would have expected, or was it a surprise to you?
By the way, thank you for not telling everybody my height, because I'm nowhere near 6'5".
Welcome to my life.
I'm not sure if Evan is as well, but he's a lot closer to it than I am.
I hate walking in like trade show floors with Evan. It's just diminishing. It's not fun.
There's a TV measurement joke in here somewhere where, like, you just have to get close enough. It's a horseshoe analogy.
It's just a rough estimate.
It's ROAS, not iROAS. I get it.
Yeah. So Dan, you were asking how I got into this space, particularly TV and video. So I would say it was a little bit by luck, although I was in adjacent spaces for sure earlier in my career. So before iSpot, I was in digital music. And before that, I was in online digital content and advertising. So I've always been sort of in adjacent spaces, but I kind of fell into TV really just by luck. I was literally Googling a TV ad and I couldn't find it on the internet in 2012. And I said, how's that possible? That's one thing led to another. And that's how iSpot got started.
That's awesome. So as you're coming up through it and you're in digital music, which is really cool, and you're coming into the TV space because Google didn't work for you to find that advertising. As you thought about it and as you grew and you started to incorporate all this new knowledge in the space, if you'd go back and give yourself a piece of advice, your younger self, what would you do? What would you say?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Look, I actually like my younger self. I think I was a real hustler and a go-getter, and sometimes I would do stupid things and all that stuff. So I actually like my younger self. I don't have an issue with my younger self, but I would probably tell my younger self to probably enjoy the journey and to really take a step back every once in a while and just enjoy the journey, because I've always been the kind of guy that has enjoyed the journey because I'm so heads down and I'm always about the next thing. So maybe that's one piece of advice I would give.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would call it maybe obsessive a little bit, Sean, if that's not an offensive term. But when I met you, I was at 2015 when we first started connecting with your team. The level of depth and passion towards solving, which even back then was a huge problem still, linear TV measurement, CTV and streaming measurement was just becoming a big problem, but not as big as it is now. Your team was so focused and so dedicated to solving this in a truly data-driven way. It was shockingly more impressive than the other tools we were looking at. Maybe just talk us through a little bit of that journey that we walked through back then. I'm happy to remember some of the details, but where did that obsession come from and how has the company changed from the original linear TV insights to what you do now, and maybe a quick recap of your top 3 products that you market today.
Yeah, so the obsession really started with what we felt was lack of data for what was and still is pretty much the largest advertising medium, which was TV. I mentioned it was as simple as me not finding a TV ad online, but it was actually much more intricate and complicated than that. It really turned out that this whole television advertising industry was really behind the times really badly. And in 2012, it was very modern. The internet was here in full force. Digital was here. You can find any piece of information online. But if you are an advertiser or even a consumer or an agency and you wanted to get information about a TV ad or a campaign, it was nearly impossible. So we really set out to digitize, we set out to do a digital transformation on television advertising is really what we set out to do. So the first thing we wanted to do is be able to track TV ads in real time using a modern system, making the ads searchable, available, making all the metadata available around the ads, and really being able to track the ad unit. So we're really the first one that brought this notion of real-time TV ad tracking to the market. So that was really our first product. It's just real-time tracking and competitive intelligence for TV ad. The next closest thing at the time was 8 weeks. You have to wait 8 weeks for the data, which is unbelievable. The next step after that is we really wanted to bring digital-like impression measurement to this offline medium that was so massive. This medium was generating so much reach, so many impressions, so much visibility, yet this sort of stodgy old system could only give you sort of estimations and rudimentary metrics on GRPs, TRPs. There wasn't any sort of precise impression type of measurement. That's when we really leaned into smart TVs. We were the first company to commercialize smart TV data at scale. We initially partnered with Inscape Vizio, since then, of course, with LG and many others. And we started literally tracking the TV ads on the digital glass. This is back in 2015. So this is before anyone was even thinking about this or even knew what this was. We literally took these ad units and we were able to detect them on millions and millions and millions of screens. We knew exactly what show they were in, which ad unit they became a part of. So tracking the ad units, and that was a lot of the early work, Evan, that you and I did at Target and Roundel, initially for Target's own marketing assessment and then getting into retail media with Roundel. So you and I have been in the retail media and the video TV space and marketing space actually for a good while here. So then once we were able to measure impressions, remember, this was digital-like. We were generating digital-like impressions with identifiers, and they had IP addresses and all the things that a digital advertising campaign had at the time and still does. And so what that allowed us to do, once we were able to digitize these impressions, now it really opened up a whole new world for us in helping advertiser assess the effectiveness. It allowed us to connect this to business outcomes. We now had impressions with identifiers that we can tie back to business outcomes. So we launched business outcome measurement back in 2017. Today, we have a very mature offering around business outcome measurement. But actually, just as importantly, it allowed us to connect these impressions with digital impressions and bring digital impressions together with television impressions and deduplicate it. And that's why it really allowed us to expand from what was initially purely TV and linear TV focus to now streaming TV, as well as social and digital video, and really encompassing all of video. So these are all just some of the innovations that we've been really obsessive about and bringing to the marketplace. And today, we're highly focused in helping advertisers assess and optimize the effectiveness of their video investments. Again, and that's linear, streaming, digital, social video. And that's from a creative, audience, and outcome perspective. So think about iSpot as an end-to-end solution for marketers, creative, audience, outcome across all video formats. linear, streaming, and digital. And while advertisers are primary business, we also work with the sell side and the different platforms in the ecosystem, such as Albertsons Media Collective, as well, in enabling a full ecosystem of highly accurate and actionable measurement and optimization.
Wow. Little masterclass in that answer. Thank you, Sean. I think what's hard for the industry to grok, though, is every company you talk to would have a similar story, maybe not quite as articulate as that, but we track data, we use ACR, we use panels, surveys, we're looking at listening boxes, and we know exactly with scientific accuracy how that campaign performed. And that's true of retail media, anyone in the space selling technology. There's lots of room for error and lots of need for companies to dig in deep into the places they're going to get measurement for their most expensive channel from. And yes, to refer back to the time when we first met, I was at Target building brand products and retail media products for Roundel. And so our journey was one of, hey, we're pitching our services as the most granular, SKU level, identified one-to-one, highly targeted audiences type of product. We can't then partner with a company that's going to have extrapolations and probabilistic and panel-based measurement and tell a very cohesive story. So the journey began, the research journey began, and we met with several companies. You were gracious enough to give us a tour of your facilities at the time in Seattle. I mean, it was mind-blowing to see all the listening centers that were distributed across the United States, to physically see the ads, not just get reports from the different aggregators out there, but to physically track and see the ad. Dan, your mind would be blown on this one. If Chicago White Sox game ran long and there was supposed to be a P&G ad for Pampers, and it didn't run in those DMAs or those zip codes, iSpot would know that. And then 2 zip codes over or all the way over to Minneapolis where I live, the ad ran on time. So that's very interesting, right? That not just that the ad ran, what time slot it was in, like part of the ad slot, day part, channel, and then all of that rolled up to larger brand connectivity. So you could go up and down the hierarchy of networks or the large CPGs that spend most on the linear TV, CTV space. And then all of that came back into a very granular, identified universe through the ACR data technology, which is where we could then begin having a conversation, because retail media prides itself on having very strong loyalty data, which turns into digital IDs through an onboarding process. And now we can talk the same language. Is it perfect? It's not 100% match. Not 100% of people have opted into everything on their TV screens, but enough have to the point where it's a far superior technology than any surveys or panels or probabilistic modeling that makes up a bulk of the competitors out there. And then from that, the beautiful thing is, not only are you able to plan and execute with that level of granularity, it's also a +1 for the linear TV side. So you can take the learnings from CTV to linear or vice versa, using that same audience, using that same insight of where people are watching and what are they actually seeing. So that was the exciting revelation that we found at Target and Roundel when we began our journey with iSpot way back when.
Yeah, and Evan, you and I were one of the early ones that matching our ID graphs. And back in 2015, we had the Roundel ID graph matched up with the iSpot ID graph, and we were creating retail media segments and pushing them into the linear TV world. So that was some of the early work that was done on that.
So now that you guys have outed yourselves as being dinosaurs in the industry and been around for a little bit, like twice you've done that, not pointing it out, just pointing it out. That means you've had quite the amassed amount of data and you've been able to see some trends over the years. So Sean, what are some of the emerging trends you're seeing in video and streaming space right now? Sports, subscription models. How does that look? What are we seeing come up?
Yeah, so there's a lot of changes happening in the TV and video landscape. First, just the rapid shift in investments from what was maybe more purely focused on linear TV to CTV and actually social now. So social video is really exploding. The shift of CTV from more of a subscription model to more ad-supported model has definitely caused like a big shift over the last several years in dollars being shifted into CTV. Programmatic in CTV has been a rising trend, and just the uprise of the sort of the non-traditional TV networks in CTV. So whether YouTube, the sheer size of YouTube on television, is mind-boggling. In fact, and we're not talking about YouTube TV even, just talking about YouTube proper. And the fact that over 50% of YouTube now is viewed on a television screen. That is just mind-boggling. The rise of Amazon as a TV network, and now Amazon owning sports rights, the football, Thursday night football, now with NBA, sports shifting to streaming. That is definitely a hugely emerging trend in the industry. By the way, retail media networks, like that's a big trend in the industry and the rise of the retail.
We've heard of those. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys may know a thing or two about that.
Well, we pretend to.
Now, with all of these amazing shifts, it's also made it really difficult for marketers to deploy their investments because now they have to deploy it over so many more channels and so many more media companies and using so many different approaches. And so now them thinking about all the way from the creative, like what creative do I even run in these different formats and channels, to am I reaching the same audiences when I buy over here on traditional linear and when I buy on Amazon and when I deploy Albertson's media network? It's just mind-boggling complicated right now. So while all these shifts are really, really exciting, it's an exciting time. It's also a time of some turbulence and turmoil. And so that's what we try to help. We try to help advertisers make good decisions and figure this mess out, if you will.
Yeah, I think we do align there on we've talked standardization on this podcast a couple times, but it goes beyond standardization for our leadership's dedication to removing friction from the retail media space. And we think of that as for the whole industry. Anytime we can get a common solution and Walmart, Roundel, anyone adopts that, and now P&G or Pepsi's a little happier, a little more inclined to invest, we all win. This race towards differentiated and super unique products, it's common. You see that in lots of places, but it does create a layer of friction. And when left to its own devices, you have a very unique, complicated, problematic ecosystem. When we look over at like open web display, you have even more publishers, tens of thousands of websites, but they've all adopted an IAB creative standard. They've all decided, hey, we're going to work with these 5 SSPs and they're all going to be available on 1 or 2 DSPs. Very simple to navigate that. And partially true because the publishers don't carry the same amount of clout as, say, an NBC or a Disney or a Roku. But what is interesting, how I think iSpot has brought that same idea of standardization to market is, let's hit on a couple things. CTV and retail media are the 2 fastest growing media channels out there. I think CTV is going to surpass 70 billion in 2027. Insane growth, insane numbers. Retail media has been on a tear for 5 to 10 years. The convergence of those creates even more friction and chaos because now you're buying Roku through the trade desk on Walmart's platform, and you're buying NBCU through DV360 on Albertson's platform. That's part of the product we just launched. And now what? You've got 2 companies using 2 ID graphs on 2 different platforms, buying 2 different inventory sets. And to the degree programmatic solves that, it doesn't because the design is not set up with a singular point of view. In iSpot's case, what I love about it is that ACR technology, again, you could poke holes in it. It's still far better than the alternatives. It's consistent. It doesn't care. It's not enabled by Netflix or Google. It's not enabled by or even preventable from Disney, NBCU, or any of the inventory providers. It can't be blocked. And so now you have a single lens across a wide swath of watchable behavior that tracks any of the ads. Again, given consumer consent and opt-in, there's any ad that shows up on that screen, YouTube app, the Roku, owned and operated channels. They're going to have the same measurement technology. And if you're partnering with a retail media network, you have the opportunity to have the exact same identity graph across all of that. Those are the 2 most meaningful standardization or simplification things I've seen in the CTV ecosystem in the last 10 years. It's very difficult, though, to convince linear TV buyers and executors that that is such a meaningful change because they've been living in a world of Excel sheets and assumed audiences that have been extrapolated over GRPs and TRPs for 5 decades, 50 years. And now we're introducing this dramatically better technology solution, but it doesn't run on a lot of that platform that linear TV is bought and sold on. It's not programmatic. It's very much the opposite of programmatic. And so we're not just trying to convince a digital native that our ID graph is better. That's a very simple conversation. You're trying to convince an industry that's got decades of investment in something that's very dramatically different. But I don't think it's one or the other, although linear TV decline is well noted. I think it can be managed and mitigated if there's an adoption and appreciation of, hey, why are people leaving linear TV? Oh, it's because all of this much more transparent, much more trackable and measurable opportunities exist over here. If they adopt those technologies and partner with retail media networks, there's a home for linear TV and linear TV purveyors for decades to come. And in fact, the two should be forced to play nice with CTV because it gives the brand the best reach and best exposure.
In that case, Sean, and I'd like to get your opinion, how can retail media networks successfully support linear TV as part of an overarching TV strategy then?
Let me actually hit on the standardization point first, because I think it's really, really, really important. And you're right. What the industry really needs is a standard way to assess every single video buy, whether it's on a traditional linear TV or it's on Disney Plus, or it's through DV 360 going to linear or going to Roku through a retail media network, or quite frankly, if it's a video buy on TikTok. So what we've been really, really focused on is providing that standardized metric across the board. And we have hundreds and hundreds of advertisers who've adopted sort of a standard metric to look at video views through that lens. And that metric starts with something really, really simple, which is an impression, a video impression, and more specifically, a verified video impression. And that sounds like a very simple thing, but in linear TV, that's never worked that way. You never measured an exact impression of an ad. You actually used to measure the program, and then just every ad in the program got the same impression level, which is not actually what's happening. So what we've done is we've taken linear, we've given it an exact impression for every ad. We do the same thing in CTV. We do the same thing in digital and social, whether it's TikTok or whatever it is. And so it starts with that equivalent impression. It's a 30-second video. You have a verified impression, and then how much of it is played. And then what screen did it play on? Did it play on a big screen? Did it play on a small screen? That's like basic and blocking. But then it gets much more sophisticated, right? Because now the advertisers want to know the deduplication. And this is where it gets really complicated, especially when you have walled gardens. And so they want to know, hey, when I bought through, I guess I've been using your example of when I bought through DV360 with Albertsons on Roku, what was my audience delivery there? And what was a deduplicated audience delivery? In other words, I want to compare what I bought there versus the audience I got on NBC or on Disney Plus. And by the way, I want to take that a step further. I want to compare that against the same audience across the board. And by the way, that audience may come from Albertsons. It might be a shopper segment from Albertsons retail media network. And I want to do that consistently. And that sort of starts to become a standard way of looking at it across the board. And then, of course, connecting it to sales and outcomes in a consistent way. So I think this is the type of the standardization that the industry is moving towards, but it's certainly not there sort of across the board. While some advertisers might be using us as the standard, and some publishers as well, there's some publishers and advertisers that don't have a standard or that are using another standard. And so we really need to get to a point where we all agree on sort of what is that standard of measurement. So that's something that we're very, very focused on. And by the way, there's disagreement about standards in general between like the traditional TV networks and the digital first companies. Like, for example, the traditional TV networks want to be credited in the measurement for the premium content. Digital first companies, some of them have the notion, hey, the notion of premium is in the eye of the beholder or the viewer. And so there's a lot of disagreements, like, do you bring in content quality as a metric, as a standardized metric? And so there's a lot to figure out there. So I do think this notion of standardization is really important. And I actually think it's really important from a retail media network, especially, and as well, because there's a variety of retail media networks, right? And if you're an advertiser and you're working with 3 or 4 different retail media networks, how do you equivalize across those? How do you know what each one is delivering versus the other and versus all the other? And so I guess, Dan, back to your question, how can retail media networks really benefit from all this and really grow in the CTV and even the linear space. And I do think it's by this notion of the standardization of the measurement. It's like, for example, hey, when you buy media from Albertsons, it comes with standardized measurement from iSpot or from another provider, whatever the case may be. And you're able to see our shopper segment. You could take our shopper segment and going to deliver against that, but you can see how everybody else delivers against it too. We're fine with that.
I think that's where we're excited to lean in because there's a couple things you hit on. The evolution of all of this extra data and knowledge and knowing with the retail side, if someone used to be a VIP loyal buyer of your brand and then they switched, who did they switch to? Did they go from full sugar to diet? Like that knowledge and history has been tracked and connected to a digital ID and is very available. Pushing it into a linear TV space, very difficult for a retail media network to do alone. But when connected to an agency, an iSpot tool set, now that knowledge can be deployed. And I think what that requires then is a retail media network to wear the right hat for the job. And in this case, it means we're not going to run linear TV on behalf of a big CPG. What we can do, though, is derive insights from maybe a win-back segment or their VIP segment or a specific demographic they're trying to target or a region. We can add all that together. That's the customization capabilities that have been defining RMN's success for a long time. And we can plug it in to the places where they do make linear TV decisions. We don't have to be wearing all the hats for that to be successful.
But it's important to note that especially the CPGs, they're still investing insane amounts of capital into linear TV. So that's why it's important to have that sort of fabric and connectivity all throughout.
So then the two things I think that round that out is when you bring in the retail media intelligence layer, and let's say it's just linear TV, it's going to be a small piece of a larger puzzle. The RMN network, who's standing behind standardization and simplification, should also provide a media mix model enablement. And so today, if you bought our audiences on Trade Desk, you could do a couple things. You could do linear reach extension, a tool provided by iSpot. You don't even have to work with Albertsons to do that. You're in complete control of that process, and you can enable the media mix model that CPG is already leveraging through the Trade Desk. So now you don't need to have us as part of your media mix conversation. Not that that's the only measurement that makes sense, but it certainly gives you the 10,000-foot view across all channels. So I think it's requiring RMNs to rethink the roles that they'll play on some of these extended versions of TV, linear being the furthest. And then as we get into CTV, the conversation turns a little bit because now we can add shoppability. We can tell bigger branding stories to the audiences that matter most and measure the success of that. It's a beautiful, I think, enrichment layer to those CTV investments. And to the degree linear continues to lose share to CTV, we can bring more transparency. It doesn't mean ROAS is the only metric RMNs should be thinking about, but it does allow brands to bring a layer of shoppability and connected commerce to their CTV layer if they choose to.
And Evan, quite frankly, it's just a smart way. What you just described, I love it. It's actually a smart way to manage that transition. Because in your example, you can use a Trade Desk with an Albertson segment and iSpot optimization and measurement to ensure that you're getting incremental audiences through CTV that are squarely targeted at the segment. And so while over here you've got linear running, you're really focusing as you're transitioning to streaming, you're focusing on the right audiences. And so you're doing it very, very efficiently as linear is sort of decreasing. So that's actually a wonderful sort of example and use case how one can like take advantage of this today, right?
Right. And then imagine that whole ecosystem is just a phone call away from the CPG telling the agency of record doing linear to work with the RMN. And we would do it, right? Hey, guys, go plan this. You're going to buy it separately. I get I'll have a different IO and a different report. Just go plan the narrative and the creative and the execution plans.
Right. You could separately optimize that linear segment.
It's very simple. We're open to those calls.
See, this is why I'm here is, Dan, you need to jump in. I don't need to jump in. You guys are doing all the hard work for me. Sean, you did bring up walled gardens. And as TV technology, as RMNs, video tech organizations, how do we remove the complexities and these walled gardens of tech partners and advertisers to make it easier for our vendor partners to come on board?
Yeah. So the way we approach walled gardens and how we integrate with them is first we start with the iSpot ID spine. So we have every household and every person mapped out across the United States. So when we integrate with a partner that's not a walled garden, it's very straightforward. We have impression log level data that's matched definitively to the right household and assigned to a person. Same with the linear TV. We are able to match it at the household level and move it and represent the entire universe. When it comes to walled gardens, generally speaking, what we do is we create cohorts of, let's say, 1,000 households that are very, very similar in demographics and makeup. They all, let's say, have children. They all have similar viewing habits. They might all subscribe to certain streaming services. So they're very, very similar. And we basically matched with the walled gardens using these cohorts and build reach and frequency within these cohorts. And then we match it back to our spine and allocate within those cohorts. Most importantly, we keep these cohorts consistent over time. So essentially, we can translate a walled garden into an identity spine. And now we can help advertisers understand the duplication and how they're performing on these walled gardens versus any other, whether it's Roku or Disney, or it's a retail media network, or it's programmatic buys through the trade desk, or whatever it is. So the most important thing is to have an independent party that's bringing these standardization and has an ID graph that truly, truly covers the entire United States, every household, every person. And that's one of the things we're really proud of that we built here at iSpot. And it's called iSpot Data Connect, which is the framework of our identity management and how we deal with these walled gardens. But working through the walled gardens and through clean rooms, we are able at the end of the day to get this down to the level that we need to get it to in order to do the deduplication. We do a lot of thinking and development now around our AI initiatives. I generally think people sort of throw AI out there with a lot of things, but I kind of like to divide AI into two parts. There's sort of traditional AI, which is sort of really just machine learning, sort of much more advanced machine learning. But then there's generative AI, which is a bit different. And I think sort of where the industry is at, I think a lot of companies use AI, machine learning generally to create better algorithms, better matching of data, better optimizations, things like that. And also in retail media network, there's just so much application for AI, given the data sets that you guys are sitting on and the patterns of buying habits, what consumers are buying, how often they're buying it, what time of day they're buying it, and how often. There's just so much machine learning AI that could be done to optimize the media. So a lot of that is actually happening already in the industry. But I think the more interesting part is generative AI, which I think is maybe you're kind of getting into, with actually generating a different version of an ad, for example, or maybe generating a storyboard for an ad or a script for an ad. And this is where we have done a lot of work and we're really, really excited about. We've invested in actual AI infrastructure here at iSpot. We actually have NVIDIA servers, all that stuff here, machinery, where we're actually working on a lot of interesting generative AI concepts where we take our rich history, 10 years of every ad that's gone on TV, with every frame and every ad indexed, understanding what's happening in that frame, with understanding how each ad performed and how each moment in the ad performed and with which audience and in terms of emotional response and brand recall. And so now think about it. Now you can really get into a lot more generative things that speed up the whole creative generating process, whether it's storyboarding or imagery or ideation. So this is the stuff that's really exciting. And I think this is the stuff that's really going to change everything in the future. And the ads don't need to be entirely generated by AI. People sort of go to the extreme on that. But what people forget is the whole process of creating an ad right now is very lengthy and expensive. And there's just so much improvement that can be done, speed and cost, and using generative AI. And that gets you into the variations as well. So I think all that is coming, but AI requires training sets. And so it's really exciting for the companies that have a rich history of data, whether it's Albertsons that has so much rich history of shopper marketing data, or for us having such a rich history of every ad and every place that it was placed in and the business results. And just, we see so many opportunities here in a future.
The way you're describing that, I mean, it spurs 20 more questions. We'll have to have you back for round 2 as we're closing out here today. But that idea of 10 years of history on a brand's creative track back to performance and intent signals, it's like a loyalty program. When we would describe something like that, it would be that shopper has come into this Safeway for 10 years and bought in this manner with this type of brand loyalty. You've basically replicated that on the content to performance side. It's a unique way of thinking about it, but that history tied back to IDs, again, that's another reason to get onto the digital side of supporting CTV, linear TV. That's a pretty cool way and a pretty cool truth set to start with training your AI. And if you can layer on shopper data and real-time SKU level sales to prove its performance, how can you come up with a better future for CTV, linear TV performance than that? And it doesn't mean you have to use Albertsons data or iSpot, but...
Totally. I mean, I have an AI idea for the retail space that I think would be pretty cool. What if I walked into an Albertsons and it recognized me and it already knew all my purchase history, and I literally just walked to a segment of the store where it already brought in all the products that I'm likely going to buy. And I could just go to that area and just like boom, 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 boom. Or maybe it's an online version of it. I don't know.
I think what you're asking for is just a personal assistant, Sean, that's going to go do your bidding.
Yeah, we got to figure out how to get power to the end of the aisles to put TVs up. So we're a few years out on that, but we're excited. If listeners, if you can't tell, Sean and Evan equal SMART, right? Very, very intelligent here. Lots of brain power going on in the room. Sean, I'd like to ask you one parting question. With your history, with knowing everything that has grown over the past decade, predict the future for me, man. What are your biggest changes to retail media over the next decade? What do you see coming?
So first of all, I think standardization across the retail media networks. We touched on that. And some better way for an advertiser to be able to engage with several retail media networks together in this sort of a more seamless way is one. And the other one, I'd say back to the AI stuff that we talked about, the retail media networks just have such rich first-party data sets that go back years and years and years. And so the opportunity to really bring much smarter targeting, creative, personalizations, all that stuff, the sky's the limit there. So I think those are kind of maybe the two areas.
That's awesome. Evan, anything for the good of the order before I dismiss class?
No, I think I've asked all my important questions. Thanks for joining us today, Sean. This was a real masterclass on what TV, CTV can be and how iSpot's driving towards that.
Yeah, thank you, Evan. Thank you, Dan. This was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Sean Muller, founder and CEO of iSpot TV. Thank you so much for being here today. This has been an episode of The Garage. Thank you again, all of our listeners, for tuning in. If you like what you hear, and I know that you do, go hit that like button, smash that subscribe button anywhere podcasts are found. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back with another episode of The Garage very, very soon. Thank you, everybody. This is The Garage.
Blowing ad budget on metrics that look great till the CFO sees them. That's bull spend. And marketers are calling it out in Dashboard Confessions.
I remember telling my boss, it'll be good for the brand, when leads were slow. Yeah, it wasn't.
Cut the bull spend. LinkedIn lets you target by company, job title, and more. Advertise on LinkedIn. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a $250 credit. Go to linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
This message comes from Jackson. Taxes aren't something you can only think about once a year. With investments, planning for tax day is year-round. Fortunately, Jackson offers tax-efficient products. Visit jackson.com for more information on how our products can make your tax bill a little bit less painful. Jackson is short for Jackson Financial Incorporated, Jackson National Life Insurance Company, Lansing, Michigan, and Jackson National Life Insurance Company of New York, Purchase, New York.
Hannah, I just Venmo'd you for dinner.
Obsessed. I'm spending it right now on the lip gloss that's been sitting in my cart.
What do you mean spending it right now?
You can instantly spend your balance with the Venmo debit card or when you pay with Venmo at checkout.
Stop. Say more.
More exactly. The more you do with Venmo, the more you get, like earning up to 5% cash back with Venmo Stash. Get the Venmo debit card or check out online. Venmo Stash bundle terms and exclusions apply. Max $100 per month. See terms at venmo.me/stash terms. Venmo checkout not available at all merchants. The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A.